Good morning once again, and thank you very much for joining the Center for Data Archiving, Management, Analysis, and Advocacy, CDAMA for short, for our first monthly webinar series for the 2024-2025 academic year. This is going to be a regular event on our calendar, and anytime it's time for such an event, we'll send you the invitation link for you to join. Today's session will be looking at research data management. And we have Dr. Joshua Sebu. He is a savvy data specialist with the center. Dr. Joshua Sebu will also take us through data sharing and access, data privacy and ethical consideration, data preservation and archiving, fair data principles. So, Dr. Sebu, please kindly take over from here.
All right, thank you, coordinator, and thanks for the opportunity to share my knowledge on this topic. So, as the coordinator rightly said, these are the topics that I'll be looking at. So, data sharing access, data privacy and ethical consideration, data preservation and archiving, and then the fair data principles. So, I'm going to start with the data sharing and access. We've already been talked, Dr. Raymond talked about data storage. But beyond data storage, we also want to share the data. We want to look at the benefits of sharing the data and giving access to others to look at. So first, we want to look at some definitions. Data sharing more or less refers to making research data available to other researchers to be able to use or to reuse. Okay, once it has been shared, you want others to also have access to make use of it by probably replicating the same work that has been done or doing other data, other research on it. The access also ensures that other researchers can retrieve and use data within some established guidelines. And some of the things I'm going to be talking about has been mentioned briefly by Dr. Kofinti whilst he was presenting, and because they are useful in terms of what you do later if you want to share and so on. So saying why share data? So the first thing is it enhances research transparency and reproducibility. If you believe you've done the right thing in terms of the data you've collected and the analysis you've done, which you have published, then there shouldn't be any problem where people can verify the findings that you've done. They can take the same data that you used and then run the same analysis and able to get the same results that you did. So people can verify the findings that has been done in existing research. Also probably reduce bias, because if you're able to make data available and people are able to reproduce, it may have been transparent about your findings, about the process you went through to make, to do the research. So it reduces the bias and increases the credibility of the results of every research that has been made available, including the data that came with it. It also facilitates collaboration and innovation. When research data is made available, other researchers can also decide to collaborate with you, the initial researcher or the producer of the data, to do other sort of work on it. And at times, they can also combine your data with their data or some data from somewhere else to go to be, come out some innovative scientific inquiry. So it's able to promote multidisciplinary research. It also increases impact, because when you make your data available, others are able to cite even the original work that came with it. So it's not only and if they cite the work, they can also cite the data. Okay, if others are going to use your data, they can cite it, and all of these are going to show how you can go about making your data available or findable. So efficient use of resources. Resources are scarce. So you don't want people to go duplicating the same research that has been, or this going back to the field to collect the same data that has already been collected. So making data available, make sure that resources are used efficiently. So it avoids duplication of efforts and save time and some resources. And lastly, why share data? And it's because funders of some of research and some journal houses require that you make your data available. And I'm sure some of you have published, have gone through this process of making your data available, have been asked by some journal houses to make your data available. But there are certain times where it's sometimes difficult or impossible to share the data, and that could include data being commercially sensitive. Imagine a data that's been collected on a business or a firm, which has a lot of secrets in terms of how the business operates to make profits and the rest. In terms of that, it's going to be difficult to make some that kind of data publicly available. The researchers may also fear losing ownership, and sometimes that is what happens because there's that scare that when you make the data available, it means that people may not attribute that data to you anymore, and that is sometimes the fear that researchers have. So some data are also confidential in connection with security issues, and because of that, it makes it quite difficult to share. But there are some solutions to that. We'll look at that soon. So breaking data protection regulations. There's a properly anonymizing can help. But in terms of that, in terms of the regulation, in terms of some sort of ethical process, it becomes difficult to be able to share the data. But again, there are some solutions to that. So some institutions lack adequate data repositories or storage systems. Okay, and I know even before for a while now, data that's been collected have not been shared, or others don't know about it because there are no repositories to share data. Well, that's in the past. Because I remember even the data collected during my MPhil is still sitting on my laptop, and I wasn't able to share them. But maybe now, with the technology available, I should be able to share. So the project will not generate or collect any research data. If the project doesn't collect data, then it means that it won't be shared. Okay, but as long as data is collected, we want that data to be made available. We want to look at some best practices for effective data sharing and access. We want to develop a data management plan. From the beginning of the research, you want to outline the process of the data process, including how data is going to be shared. If you have the idea of sharing the data at the end of the research. In terms of that data management plan, you want to be able to specify how the data will be shared. You want to also specify when it's going to be shared. Would it be shared just when the data has been collected, or after some research has been done or a report has been generated out of the research, and then where the data will be made available to other researchers or to the public. Also, you want to use repositories for data storage, and Dr. Kofinti also made mention of that. You store them, and that makes them even, it makes it possible for it to be shared. So deposit data sets in recognized institutional repositories or open access platforms. You also want to ensure that repository provides the DOIs or some unique identifiers so that it makes it easy to be found online. When you are sharing, you can share that link for others to be able to get access to it. You also want to provide metadata and some documentation. Everything that contains that has to do with the data, the code book and some manual, including the questionnaire, the methodology that was used in collecting the data. All of that, you want to make it available We'll have all these things available so that when you share, people will be able to use the data. So you want it's not only about sharing, you want the data to be used, you want it to be useful when people get access to that data. I want to look at some options for sharing data. So some data are managed by some research groups and or a school. And when that is done, people within that research group can always have access to it. They just have to seek permission by the one who is managing that data, and it is made available. Also, data available from researcher on request. And I'm sure you've read some articles, and it stated that data will be made available upon request. It means you have to email the researcher or the corresponding author, and then hopefully that is made available. The data included with published article as supplementary information files. So some data automatically comes, some research automatically comes with the data as a supplementary file. So you can always get access to it, and that one doesn't need any sort of permission from the researcher. So data are published in a data journal. We also have data available from data archive or repository. Okay, so you would have something like the Harvard Dataverse and the other ones that was mentioned earlier. You can also have, that is one way of sharing it. And then data openly available from a data archive or repository. In all of these, you realize that some of them have some level of, in terms of accessibility. Some are open, you don't need any authorization to use it, but others need authorization to use them. So in terms of that, we look at the types of access. So the open access is freely available. So if you go to, for instance, the Bank of Ghana website, the economic data is available free. You don't have to fill in any sort of application or have some authorization to be able to use it. The WDI data is also publicly available and is open access. You can always use it or have access to it. But we also have the controlled access, where that requires some sort of registration. So if you go, for instance, go to the Ghana Statistical Service website and want to have access to, say, the Ghana Living Standard Survey or the Annual Household Income Expenditure Survey, or most of the surveys, including the census data that they collect, you need to fill in some data. Fill in some form to be able to have access to it. And again, even I'm talking about even Ghana Statistical Service, also CDAMA. We also have a repository where we're able to collect data or store archive data to make it available to the public, and that one also need some registration to get access to it. They also have embargoed access. The embargoed access. I remember this is just a little diversion. I remember for my PhD research, after I had finished, I placed an embargo on it for 3 years before it was made public, just because I wanted to make sure that I've been able to publish it and publish all the chapters before it's made public. So it was about 3 years. And again, data can also be made so. So some sort of period when it's going to make publicly available, it's some timeline is placed on it. So either a year or 2 years after the data has been collected, just to make sure that maybe the researchers who collected the data are able to come up with publish some findings out of that data before it is released to the public. But in terms of also making it available, you want to have that access control. Okay, so sensitive and confidential data have to be safeguarded, okay, by regulating or restricting access to and use of that data. Okay, so where the data has some sensitive and confidential data, it means that there has to be some sort of safeguarding. And access control should always be proportionate to the kind of data and level of confidentiality involved. Where the sensitivity or the confidentiality of the data is high, it means that in terms of the access control, it has to also be very high. If it is low, if the sensitivity is low, then it means that in terms of the kind of control you want to give will also be low. So you have to look at that the level of sensitivity and confidentiality of the data. And access controls you put on would also be guided by where you deposit the data. So if you've deposited in, let's say, the Ghana Statistical Service website or maybe the CIDAMA repository, depending on the kind of regulations we have, then that will also guide as to where the data should be put. So I'll quickly move into data privacy and ethical considerations. So if you look at data privacy, it ensures that personal and sensitive information is protected. And this again from people who have no business of having that kind of information and those who are going to misuse that kind of information. It involves techniques for data security, anonymization, and then access control, which I made mention earlier, but we'll look at issue of anonymization again. For ethical consideration, to ensure that research upholds integrity, respects participants' rights, and minimizes harm. Okay, so this will include making sure that your participants are well informed about the research. Their confidentiality is assured and that you are transparent about the entire research. So in terms of the importance of data privacy and ethical consideration, it builds trust among the researcher and then the participants, or even entire stakeholders that are involved. If you're able to make sure that information that you collect from participants are kept confidential, sensitive information are hidden, it means that you have built trust, and you can always go back to them to collect more data because they know their information is secured and no one can identify them within your data. You also say it promotes ethical accountability in research practices. Because in terms of ethical, if you come to UCC, we have the institutional review board that makes sure that everyone that is going out to collect data on human participants comes to them and they make sure that everything you're going to be doing is ethical. Therefore, it means that this is going to promote ethical accountability. Again, if you are following this process, you make sure that you're able to shield yourself from any sort of legal and reputational risk. No one's used you because you didn't make the information secured. So again, it's very important that the data privacy and ethical considerations are taken when especially sharing data. So I talked about informed consent and also about participant rights, and I want to look at it just in a little depth. If you look at what informed consent is that it's a process of making sure that your participants know that they are joining or they are partaking in your research voluntarily. They agree to partake voluntarily. They are not being coerced to undertake this research, and they understand the objectives or the purpose of this research that they are going to be engaged in. They know the risk and then they know the benefit. You want to explain all of these to them so that they are well informed, and when they are giving their consent, they know that this is the risk involved, this is the benefit involved. But again, beyond that, they should also be aware that they can withdraw at any time. If it's about 50 questions and they reach question 49, they can decide to withdraw. And it means that all the data you've collected on them can be deleted. Or even beyond the data collection time, they can also ask that their data be deleted. They don't want their information to be part of it. All of these must be made known to the participants before the questions begin. And when it comes to online, because sometimes normally for paper or when you go out and you have the copy, you're able to capture that. But when it comes to online surveys, you have to ensure that some sort of digital consent is given. Okay, you can use that one in time, use some e-signature or a checkbox to verify, before they can verify or validate that they are willing and able to participate in the research. When it comes to anonymization and the identification techniques, we're saying that you have to remove all identifying information, anything that will identify them, anything that will trace the information back to them. You want to take it out of the data before you make it public, or even before you public in terms of through a publication or sharing the entire data. Also, you can use pseudonyms instead of using, if names are important, then you don't have to actually use their names, but some sort of codes to identify them. And especially if those who engage in qualitative research, when you've collected data on participants and you are writing their codes, you don't write their actual names. You use some sort of pseudonyms in place of their actual names, and this is an example. Also, in terms of data collected, you want to aggregate the information. An example could be age groups or age group averages. You combine the information so that no single person can be identified within that data. And also masking and reduction of data points. And this, if you take, for instance, the Ghana Census Service, which collect data on even GPS, sometimes they make them available in terms of GPS coordinates available, but those GPS coordinates have been shifted by some random distance so that people will not be able to identify who said what, because it's going to be it's easy when you have GPS coordinates of a participant. You're able to locate where they are, and then you know all the information about that. But in terms of this, if you're going to make GPS information available, you want to be able to shift it so that it doesn't really identify them. But in terms of that, it doesn't have to reduce. I mean, you are only reducing it, but doesn't reduce the quality of the data that's going to be shared. Also, in terms of data security and storage, you want to be able to encrypt the data, encrypt sensitive data, both in storage and during transmission. And also in terms of access control, implement role-based access, allowing only those who need access to it or the only people who have access, especially to the sensitive data. So use strong authentication methods. So those who are going to be having access, you make sure that nobody can break into the storage area or the storage device to have illegal access to the data. You also need to do regular audits and monitoring. Okay, you have to conduct routine checks to check for vulnerabilities. We know that technology is improving, so the previous technology, the previous storage or sharing process may be now vulnerable to hacks, new ways of hacking. So you always have to do some regular audits to make sure that how you are sharing data or the storage area is always secured. And also secure backup systems, making sure that you are backing up the data in several locations so that when one is lost, you always have the data at other locations. In terms of that, so I quickly move into data preservation and archiving. So for data preservation, we say it involves storing data long-term to prevent loss and destruction. Okay, so this will ensure that there's always accessibility and usability even several years to come. And I'm sure if you go to some of these data archives, I'm always going to probably use the Ghana Census Service and even our CIDAMA repository. You can get data that, actually for the Ghana Census Service website, you can get data that were collected in the 80s because they've been able to preserve them well, and we can even access them several years now, and hopefully in future years we can also have access to them. Then data archiving focuses on the systematic approach to storing and managing data. So if you're going to put the data in these repositories, that is more of what the data archiving. But in terms of this, there has to be some process, some systematic way of doing that. And in terms of that, you have to make sure that the necessary information, including the metadata, which my my colleague talked about must be made available. So all the importance of that, this ensures continuity of research. Okay, allowing future research to build on past work. We can always go back, look at what was available, that was available, compare that to what's available now to see whether there's progress or there's retrogression when it comes to social issues or even health issues or whatever borders the society. It also provides provides a lasting record of data for verification, validation, and reuse. So you can always validate previous facts or previous findings. Okay, check their validity to make sure that they are right. We didn't make any mistakes in the past. It also protects against data loss and ensuring that valuable data is accessible, even when technology changes. Okay, even when organization changes, we can always still have access to those data. So for the process of data preservation and archiving, data collection and preparation. So collect data with preservation in mind. You have to, that has to start from the beginning. Know that you have to be preserving data for future use. So you have to have that in mind from the clear start. So in terms of documentation and how things are going to be organized must be done well. Everything that pertains to that the data collection preparation must be done from the beginning. And then for data cleaning and quality assurance, you have to make sure the data is well cleaned. Every sort of error is dealt with. Any sort of inconsistencies are dealt with because we want to work with quality data. When all of these are done, it ensures that the quality, the data that we're going to be put in the public is of high quality. You also want to create a valuable metadata that will make sure that anyone who takes the data and wants to work with it understands the variables that have been put in the data or that have been collected in the data, and anything in terms of the time, if there has been any change, update on the data, you need to be able to include that also. Then deposit and verification. Deposit data in a trusted repository. There are several repositories around. Even my colleague talked about our Dropbox and OneDrive and the rest. But you have to make sure that they are secured so that it is trusted. But there are some challenges when it comes to data preservation and archiving, and especially one in terms of technological obsolescence. If things are changing, it means that how do you make sure that data that was collected in the past can still be assessed now? Okay, so that is one challenge when things when technology is changing. Also, in terms of resource constraint, it involves money. Maybe the storage device that you are using is now full. You need to increase the storage size. Do you have the resource to be able to increase the size of the data? We now talk about big data. And big data, you don't need a 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte. You need a huge data storage area to be able to store that. And now all of that are challenges in preservation and archiving. Data privacy and security. How able to make sure that sensitive data is anonymized. All of these are challenges. And then providing sufficient or consistent metadata or documentation. All of these are sometimes challenging when you go and take a data and you find out that this data is unusable because there's insufficient documentation to it. So the best practice for effective data preservation is select reputable repositories, back up your data, and then make sure that the data is also stored in several areas, give right or the correct data documentation, including metadata, and then also develop a data management plan, which includes how you're going to store the data, how you're going to share the data, and so on. And my colleague also talked about the formats, and there are some good formats, especially if you wanted to, people to be able to use it in future. So when it comes to text data, you have the CSV, you have the XML, you have the text, image data. These are the best ones, the TIFF, and then the JPEG 2000. We have the audio or video. We have the Wave MP4. Geospatial also has these. All of these just to make sure that the files don't become obsolete. They can always be used and can also be interoperable, can be transferred to other places, or can also be linked to other data sets. So lastly, I look at the fair data principles. So when it comes to fair data principles, FAIR is just an acronym for data being findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So it provides a framework for sharing data in a way that maximizes its use and reuse. Okay, researchers, we spend a lot of resources to collect data. You want to be able to maximize the benefit of that data. Okay, so if, for instance, I talked about my master level data, if it was made public, I'm sure a lot of people would have been able to publish out of that. But as of now, maybe no one has been able to do anything out of it because it's still lying on my desktop. So if we need to be able to maximize that fair data ensures that we're able to increase the impact of our data beyond the researcher who collected that data. So how do we make data findable? So the data has sufficiently rich metadata. Very important. Make sure that documentation on that data is rich enough to make it reusable. And also has a unique identifier. So the DOI to it, which anyone, if you can share online or in your research, you can share it so that people can always cite the data. And when people are also finding that data, they can also even find the research that you've done in relation to that and even cite your work. So you have multiple benefits out of it. Accessible. So ensure that the data is retrievable through standard communication protocols. Okay, you want to indicate any conditions of access. So in terms of licensing, they need some sort of authorization or authentication to be able to have access to it. We also have the interoperable. So use standard formats and vocabularies to facilitate integration with other data sets. If you provide enough information, other researchers may be able to know that, okay, this data will be useful for my data and I can integrate it into mine. But when you provide little to no information on that data, its maximization will be less. People will be able to know that, oh, I can link this data to maybe this is socioeconomic data. I can link it to a health data. I can link it to maybe an agricultural data. I can link it to an environmental data, so that that kind of multidisciplinary research can be done. So you need that. You need to be able to do that. There are adopt protocols and tools that support data exchange across systems and then disciplines. Then the last one, reusable, they include rich metadata and documentation to ensure secondary use of the data. And in terms of reusable, you don't want to make the data available, or data that you make available, you diminish it to the sense that it's only useful for the work that you have done. All the other things, or maybe all the other variables that you didn't analyze, you take it out and just limit it to what you did, just because you still have plans of doing more research on it. Yeah, we have the embargo one, but if you want to make it available and reusable, I think you want to, I think this can even make increase collaboration if you make it available. To ensure that data is licensed appropriately. And usually the one you use is the Creative Commons license, which allows people to use the data without any legal boundary. But why fair data is important? This maximizes the potential of data assets. Okay, so we're able to, beyond the researcher or the research institution that collects the data, when they make it available, others are able to use it, and then all the potential that data processes are able to come to the fore. So it's quite important. It also increases the visibility and the citation of the research. It's made available, people to know that, okay, this data is available. I don't have to go back and collect or go to the field to collect another data. So they can also use it. They can cite your data and then even cite any research that is linked to that data. It also improves the reproducibility and reliability of the research. Okay, you share your data, people can trust your data, and then, trust your work, because it means that you've opened yourself up for people to replicate your work to ensure that it is whatever you've done or whatever findings you published are right. Also aligns with international standards, and so if you want an international champion, so attract new partners. So you can collaborate with other researchers, other businesses, other policy makers, and even the broader communities, because they know what you've done, and they can always come back to you and ask for more from you. So it enables new research questions to be answered, one that you may not be able to see, but someone sitting somewhere who have seen your data can say, oh, this is a new thing that can be done given the data that's been collected. And last, we say achieves maximum impact from research. And just to summarize what I've said so far, in terms of data sharing access, so this facilitates collaboration and transparency. It's best managed through secure repositories and clear access policies. And for the data privacy and ethics, safeguards sensitive information with anonymization, informed consent, and compliance with legal standards. Then for the data preservation and archiving, it ensures long-term data usability and reliability through secure storage. The fair data, so to be able to maximize research impact and accessibility. In terms of this, all of these helps to enhance the quality of your data, the sustainability, and ethical use in research. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sebu, for your presentation.